In this video, as you can see in the preview here, I'm going to show you how to create a Python hash generator with a Tkinter graphic user interface. By the way, just a quick reminder, you can get the source code of this and other videos using the link down in the description. Down below you can also find other interesting things like links to join amazing learning platforms and a lot more. So go and check them out to see if there is something you're interested in, and thank you so much for supporting this channel. Okay, so first of all, let's import, as usual, Tkinter SDK. Okay. And then I'm going to import from Tkinter, import file dialog, okay, and then I'm going to import hashlib, which is the module that we're going to use to create the hashes, etc., etc. So to create this hash generator, I'm going to use a class because the program is a little more complex, so it's better to use that. I actually always recommend to use the class because I think that using a class is always so much better when you are creating applications because it makes things easier and structured better. If you want to learn more about classes, I actually made a series about them, so I'll leave the link in the description box down below if you want to check that out. So let's start with class hash generator, the frame, okay, then I'm going to do something like this, okay, so the init method, and here I'm gonna just write a few variables that we're gonna use for the colors. So color, and this is going to be 005499, then self background color 2, and this is going to be all right, and then self dot foreground color, and that's going to be white. I'm actually using variables here so that instead of hard coding the various colors for the widgets, I'm just going to use those variables, and if you need to change the color because you don't like them, etc., you can just change them here, and then everything will be changed accordingly because you're not hard coding the values inside the widgets, but you're just using the variables here, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's the reason why I'm actually doing this, so that you can then customize the application as much as you want. Okay, of course you can even use more variables for more things, but I'm just going to do this for the colors. Okay, so white, and that's self button active bg color. As you can see, I'm using really straightforward names so that you can actually understand straight away what is this. Okay, the button, the active background for the button, the active foreground for the button, etc., etc. So it's really important that you actually use names for the variables that are understandable, okay, not like self BAF. Well, you know, it doesn't make sense. Okay, self dot file path going to be an empty string for now, and then self dictionary results. Okay, perfect. And now let's actually call the init method of the frame. If you don't understand what I'm doing, it means that you don't understand classes, so I highly recommend you go and watch the mini series that I made. So background. So as you can see, now I'm going to use the background color like this. Okay, so now if you want to change the background color, I just need to go here. I'm gonna change that here, and then of course this is changed as well without having to change that here and all the other widgets that we're gonna create. Okay, like that, perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to do something like self main frame, and it's going to be self. So if you've watched some of my other videos, you know that I like to do something like this, because in this case, self is the main frame. Okay, self is the main frame of the window. But if you just use self, like let's say that you want to use self.grid or self.pack, etc., it could be quite misleading, quite confusing. So if you just write self.mainFrame. So now you've got self.mainFrame and then self that are basically the same thing. But if you do something like mainFrame.grid, then you can tell straight away that you're talking about the mainframe. So that's actually why I'm doing that, if you're wondering why I'm doing this. Okay, perfect. So I think that it's so much clearer to specify self.mainFrame. And then I'm going to use pack. So pack fill is going to be TK both expand true. Okay, so to cover the whole window. And then here I need to configure the column. So the first column, which is 0, because those are 0 indexed. So the column 0 means that it's the first column. And I'm going to do the same thing for the row configure, but in this case 1 weight 1, which basically means that the first row will have the set height and the second row will stretch to cover the remaining part of the application. Okay, you'll see what I mean in a second. By the way, don't forget that you can get the source code of this and other videos using the link down in the description. Down below you can also find other interesting things such as links to join amazing learning platforms and a lot more. So go and check them out, and thank you so much for the support. Then here I'm just going to do something like self-title tk.label. So I'm going to create the title for the application. So background is going to be self, background color, the foreground is going to be self.foreground color, font. As usual, I'm just going to use Arial, which is sort of standard, but you can use whatever you want. Then text, hash generator, perfect. Then, of course, we need to place it on the screen. So we're going to write self.title. I'm going to use grid in this case, and I want that to be in the first column, the first row. I want that to stretch horizontally, not vertically. And then part Y is going to be 20, 0, like this. All right. Perfect. Now here I'm actually going to call a method that will render the first basically page, let's call it like that, and I'm going to just do that, and then we are going to create the method. So self.render select file. Okay, and this method is something that we're going to create down here. So as you can see, you've got init, and then this is a class method. Okay, so make sure you actually get the indentation right. So def render select file self, of course. Okay, in this method we're going to create the first page, which is basically the button in the middle that we can click to select the file that we want to get the hash of. So here for the moment I'm just going to do something like self.button. We're just going to create the button, so tk.button, like that. Self.mainFrame background. As you can see, I'm just going to use the button background color, and then for the foreground, self.button foreground color. Okay, then active background is going to be self.btn active background color, and active foreground is going to be self.btn foreground color. So as you can see, by using those variables, you can basically change the colors above, and then all the widgets with those colors will get the new colors. Okay, so that's really, really powerful in my opinion. Select file. The width is going to be 20 pixels. Let's actually go a little bit up like that. Okay, then the height is going to be 4. By the way, I said pixels, but they are not pixels because we are not going to use images. We're going to use text, which means that those are like characters basically. So 20 characters or 4 characters, something like that. Okay, so those are not pixels. Then the cursor is going to be hand 1, so that we can actually see the little hand. Highlight thickness is going to be 0, don't want that. And then I don't want the border. Okay, and then let's place it on the frame using the grid as well. So in this case, column 0, row 1. So in the first row, we've got the title, and the second row, we've got this button here. Okay. By the way, up here, I just wrote self, but that is actually self.mainFrame. That's the same thing, because as I said, self.mainFrame and self are the same, basically the same thing. But as I said, we are going to use this to make everything clearer. Okay, so make sure you actually write self.mainFrame here. So as I said, the label, this title is the first row, okay, which has weight 0, which means that it doesn't stretch. So it basically holds the title and that's it. The second row that holds the button, okay, this button here, is going to stretch to cover the remaining part of the application. But let's actually go down here and write what we need to actually see the application so that you can see what I mean. Okay, so root tk.tk, like that. Then hash generator app, it's going to be hash generator, and then we're going to pass the root. Then the root.title is going to be hash generator, of course. Root geometry is going to be 900 by 550, and then root resizable. In this case, I want the width true, so I want that resizable, and false. So basically, you can actually make it wider, but you can't make it taller. Okay, so that's what that means. And then root main loop. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, hit the like button to let me know, and also subscribe to the channel as well for more videos like this one. So let's actually try to run it and see what we've got so far. So, all right, so we've got this, pretty cool. You can actually stretch it like this, okay, but you can't stretch it this way, just this way, okay, because then here we'll have all the hashes. So if someone wants that to be wider, they can actually do that, okay. And as I said, this is the first row that holds the title, in this case like this, and from here to here you've got the second row with the button in the middle, okay, because we actually set weight 1 for this row here, so it stretches to cover the remaining part of the application. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, so let's close that. So now, of course, we need to add the function to get the path of the file in the render select file. So up here, render select file, here, we can define a function, select file, which is not a method. This is just a function inside the method render select file. And this one will actually allow the user to get the file. So we're going to do something like file dialog, ask open file. Okay, and here I'm gonna set an initial directory. I'm just doing that because so that I can show you how it works, but you can just not write it, okay, like that. So when I actually open the dialog, yeah, I get straight away in this folder so that I can show you how things work without having to actually go and find the files, etc., etc. Okay, so ask open file will actually return a file object, but we don't actually need the file object at the moment, but we just need the path of that file, if that makes sense. So we're going to do something like if file. So if we actually get a file, because if you have the dialog and then you cancel without actually selecting a file, you don't get anything. So you don't want to go ahead. You actually want to wait until the user really selects a file. All right. So in this case, if file, we're actually going to get the path. So file path, file name, like that. Okay, because the file object has this attribute, which is name, which contains the actual path of that file. And then, as we don't actually need the file object, I can actually close the file. And once we have the path of the file, we can actually destroy the button because we don't actually need that anymore. So self.button, and we're going to destroy that so we don't see that anymore on the screen. Fabio from the future here. I'm editing the video and I've just noticed that we could have done things better here, because instead of using ask open file here, we could have used ask open file name like this, and ask open file name just returns the path of the file without opening it, which means that we don't need to close it. So we can actually delete this, and here the file, it's already the path. Okay, so you don't need to actually access like file.name. You can just do that in this way. Okay, so this is basically the best way of doing that because we're actually using the right method, okay, and we don't need to close the file because this method doesn't actually open that file. So although the other version worked, okay, I just wanted to change this to make that even better without doing more steps that are not needed. Okay, so let's go back to the original video. Now that we've got the path, we can actually create a new frame that will hold the loading text and then the results. So I'm just going to call it self.results frame, like that, and that's going to be a frame in the main frame, the background is going to be self.background color 2 in this case, then results frame dot grid like this, and the first column, so 0, row 1, which is where the button was earlier, then sticky. I want that to stretch to cover the whole thing, okay, then part X 30 pixels, and then part Y is going to be 20 and 30, okay, and then self.results frame column configure like this, and then it's going to be 0 weight 1. Okay, so now that we've got this new frame, we are going to create the title for this frame. Then we'll start with the text loading, and then we'll change that to results. Okay, so self title results is going to be a label in this case, self dot results frame, and that's going to be something like background, so dot background color 2. The foreground is going to be self dot foreground color like this, then the font the same thing as usual, so Arial 17 bold, and then the text is going to be loading at first, and then we're gonna change that as I said, and of course we need to place it inside the frame. So title results grid, so the column is going to be the 0, row 0, sticky tk dot NSEW, and then the padding. Okay, so now of course, as we've got this new function here, we need to actually write it here as the command of the button. So down here we can do something like command and then select file like this. As you can see, I didn't write something like this, but just something like that. I've actually made a video on button commands, how to use commands with arguments, etc, etc. So I'll leave the links in the description box down below if you want to check that out. It's really interesting. So now let's see how that works. Okay, so let's actually run it. So as you can see, everything works. If you click on that, this dialog appears. As you can see, this is on Linux, so you've got a certain kind of dialog. On Windows, it's going to be different. So this one is a little bit bigger, and this one is a little bit smaller. This is really small. Either of them is good now because we're not going to actually calculate the hashes yet. So let's use this, open. As you can see, you get this. This is the results frame, and then you've got the loading text here. So everything is working so far. So let's close that. Perfect. Of course, we're not getting any results because we're not actually calculating the hashes yet. So let's now create a new method that will calculate all the hashes. So down here, as you can see, render, select file. We are still inside the class. This is a class method. We're gonna write it here. We're gonna call it def calculate hashes, something like that. You can call it however you want. So let's first create a few hash objects. So the first is going to be md5, and that's really easy because we're going to do something like hashlib.md5. Really easy. Let's actually add a few. This is going to be this. This is going to be 6. Okay. 3, 4. And then, and also here 512, and then now we're going to add them to a list. So list hash objects, something like that, and then we're going to write something md5 12. Okay, I'm actually creating a list so that we can loop through them and do whatever we need to do. And now we need to actually open the file. So with open self.file path rb as file. So basically we are opening the selected file, and the file now is a binary stream. So now that the file is open, we can actually loop through the hash objects. So for hash object in list hash objects like that. And now we need to read the file and calculate the hash. And we could read the whole file, so something like this. So hash object update and then file.read, okay, something like that. Update actually calculates the hash, and given that the hash object is md5 the first time, and then sha1, sha254, etc., you get different hashes, of course, but this could lead to a big problem because when you do this, Python will load the whole file in memory, which means that if the file is 10 gigabytes, then you would get 10 gigabytes in RAM, which could probably crash your system if you don't have a lot of RAM, okay? So with the hash object, we can do something really, really cool. So instead of reading the file in one go like this, we can actually read it line by line, and with each line we can update the hash, and at the end we will get the same result. And of course in memory we only get one line at a time, okay? So we could do something like for line in file hash object update line, okay? So we are updating the hash with each line. So basically we update the hash with the first line, and then we update it with the second line, etc., and at the end you are gonna get the same exact result as if we were reading it in just one go. You could check the size of the file, and for bigger files you could use one method, and for small files you can use the other method, but I don't think that's worth it because here in this case we're not calculating a lot of hashes, so even if we need to wait a few seconds longer, that's not a big deal in my opinion. But here there is a problem. When you read a file, when you go through a file, the cursor starts at the beginning, and then you read the file line by line, etc., and then the cursor is at the end of the file, okay? So basically it starts at the beginning and it reaches the end, and then it stays at the end. If you close the file and reopen it, that's not a problem because it always starts at the beginning. But as here we are opening it just once, the first time is fine because you go through the file, you start from the first line and you read all the lines, and then it reaches the end. But then as we need to go through that again, as the cursor is at the end, you basically don't read anything. So the full line in file is basically nothing because the cursor reached the end, okay, if that makes sense. So we need to make sure that for each hash, you basically go back to the beginning of the file. And you can do that using this thing here. So let's actually delete this. You can do something like file.seek, okay, which moves the cursor 0, which is the beginning of the file. So now you open the file once, you move the cursor to the beginning, but the first time is already at the beginning. Then you go through the whole file, then the cursor is at the end, then you go to the second hash, you bring the cursor from the end to the beginning again, and then you calculate the hash, the second hash, and then you bring the cursor to the beginning again, and then you calculate the third hash, etc. This is really, really important because otherwise you're not gonna get the right hashes, because the first time you're calculating the right hash, but the second, third, etc., you're calculating the hash of basically an empty file, okay? Let's do this to make that better. Okay, so after we calculate the hash, we can actually add it to the dictionary. So self dictionary results hash object dot name, which is an attribute of the hash object that returns basically md5, sha1, etc., a string, and then hash object hex digest. So in this case, we're using the name of the hash as the key in the dictionary, so md5, sha1, etc. And then we are converting the hash object to hexadecimal, which is basically the typical format used for hashes. Okay, so now that we actually have the hash, we can actually call this function up above. So up here, like after the title results, okay, here, we can do something like self.calculate hashes, like this. Let's actually call it like this, but I can already tell you that there is a problem to fix here, but let's first create a new method that will render the results, and then we'll actually fix that, okay? So now we call this and we calculate the hashes, so all the hashes will be added to the dictionary. So now we've got a dictionary with all the hashes, but we need a way, as I said, to actually render the results line by line. So to do that, we're actually going down here, after the calculate hashes, here, and we're going to add another method which is called render results, like that, self. Let's actually call the method here because now we are like here, calculate hashes, and once we've done the calculation, we can actually render the results. So here we can actually call already render results like this, okay? Because once we are done with the calculation, we can show them to the user. And inside the render results method, we can first of all change the loading text to results. So we can do something like title results config text results, like that. Okay, so let's try to run it. All right, so let's select this file. This is a small file, so everything works as expected because it calculates everything, but it's so quick that you don't see the loading and then you see the results straight away. But if you actually select a bigger file, like this one, as you can see, you don't see anything, you don't see the loading, and then you see results straight away. So why does that happen? So first of all, you need to know that the Tkinter loop refreshes the interface when it can, meaning that if Python is busy doing something else, the loop cannot refresh the GUI, and it waits until everything is finished, and then it refreshes the GUI. Okay, so in this case, we add the title results here. So here we add the title results with the loading, and then we place it on the screen. But then we don't give Tkinter enough time to actually refresh the interface, and we call self.calculate hashes straight away, which means that now Python is busy calculating the hashes. So Tkinter is waiting, and once everything is finished, then it can show you the loading text. But as down here, when everything is finished, so all the hashes have been calculated, etc., we call self-render results straight away, which changes the title from loading to results. So basically, Tkinter wants to show the loading text, but then when Tkinter can actually show the loading text because everything is finished, you change that text to results straight away, so you don't even see loading. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So you can actually see that here. So if we do this and then we pass, okay, so we don't change the from loading to results, and we do the same thing, okay, video, as you can see, you don't see anything. And then once everything has finished, so all the hashes have been calculated, etc., then Tkinter can actually show the loading text. But as we are changing that straight away after the hashes have been calculated, we change loading to results straight away, you don't even see the loading, but you see results straight away, as you can see. Now there should be loading, but we changed that and we actually see results, okay? I hope that actually makes sense. So instead of calling the function here like this, which is basically synchronous, which means that it blocks everything because Python needs to actually call this function and do whatever it needs to do inside of that function. So it's basically synchronous, so it cannot do anything else. So we need a way to actually be able to let Tkinter refresh the interface, and then once the interface is refreshed and the loading is shown on the screen, then we can start calculating the hashes. We could do that with the root.update stuff like that. So something like root.update, okay, something like that. But that's not the best way because in the documentation they say that this might not work. So we're going to do something that is definitely going to work, which is using root.after 100. Don't worry, I'm going to explain you what this does in a second. Okay, so instead of calling it like that, we call this. So basically this schedules an event after 100 milliseconds that will call the calculate hashes. And this delay will allow Tkinter to refresh the interface and show the loading text, and then all the hashes will be calculated and the results will be shown. So Tkinter for 100 milliseconds doesn't have anything else to do, so it can refresh the interface straight away, and then this event that was scheduled is run, and then the self-calculate hashes will start calculating all the hashes, and then we'll see the results. Okay, I hope that makes sense, and we'll actually see that in action right now. So if we do this and we do like video, as you can see loading, we see that everything straight away and then results. Okay, as you can see, that works like a charm now. But of course now we have the results, but we need a way to actually show them to the user. Otherwise it doesn't make sense. Okay, so what are we going to do? Down here, render results. So now we've got just the title results, and we're going to add another frame. Okay. I'm just using like a local variable here. We could use like self.hashesFrame, but I'm not going to use that anywhere else. So if you want to do that, you can do that, but I don't see the need to do that. So I'm just using a local variable here. So self.resultsFrame like this. Then the background is going to be self.background color 2. And then the path X is going to be 20. Then hashes frame dot grid, okay, column 0, row 1, sticky is going to be tk.nsew, part y is going to be 20 and 0, and then I part x 20 pixels, okay, like that. So the padding inside. Then hashes frame column configure, the first column weight 1, because basically I want the first column to contain the names of the hashes, and that needs to be just as wide as needed to actually contain the names. And then the column with the actual hashes, which is the column 1 here with index 1, needs to stretch to cover the remaining horizontal space in the application. You'll see what I mean in a second. Okay, so now that we have a new frame to place all the hashes in, we can go through the dictionary, which contains the hash names as keys and the actual hashes as the values. And we're going to use enumerate like this. So we're going to do something like index hash name in enumerate self dictionary results. And you might be wondering, why am I doing this? Enumerate actually returns a tuple with the first element is the index, which is like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And the second is the actual key, which is the md5, etc., the names of the hashes. And I'm actually using enumerate here because I need the index which starts from 0, and we're going to use it as the row number later on, and you see what I mean. So now for the hashes name, we can do something like label hash label like that, and we're going to do like hashes frame, of course, because that is inside the hashes frame. The background is going to be self bg color 2. The foreground is going to be self dot foreground color like that 13, and the text is of course the hash name, which is the key. In this case, the first time is the md5, etc. Anchor. I want that to be on the left, okay? And of course, now you're gonna see why I use the index. So grid, row, index, column 0, pad y 10, sticky, I want that to stretch horizontally. So the first row will be the first hash, the second row will be the second hash, so on and so forth. So this will be like 0 the first time, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay, and then you can add as many hashes as you want, okay, by changing the code above. And this will actually work straight away because you don't have anything hard-coded, and you're using enumerate to get the index and the row number. So let's actually see what we get, okay, with the hash names. So let's do that. Let's do like this small file. So as you can see, you got results, md5, sha1, etc., etc. So as you can see, this is the first column, and this is that. And this from here to here is the second column, which stretches, okay, because we used weight 1 for that column. And here we're going to write the hashes. So let's close that. We're actually going to use an entry to contain the actual hashes, and it'll be in read-only mode because the user needs to be able to select and copy the whole hash, but they don't need to actually be able to change the content of these entries. So down here, we're going to do something like entry hash entry. There's going to be hashes frame. The foreground is going to be black. This is the only hard-coded color. You can actually create a new variable up above and change that color as well. bg color 2. Select foreground self.foreground color. Read-only background. In this case, that is hard-coded as well with white. Font Real 13, the font size, then highlight thickness 0, border width 0, justify tk.left like that. And then of course we need to insert the hash. So to do that, we're going to do something like entry hash insert at the start dictionary results, and then hash name. Because of course here we are still inside the loop, okay? So we are still like The first time is md5, so now there is going to be like the hash with the key md5, and then we're getting the hash there, okay, the hexadecimal hash there. Then I'm going to do something like entry state read only. So you may be wondering, why didn't I do that already here, like state and read only? Because if we do that here, we cannot insert anything. We can't even insert anything with the code. So I'm just going to insert that and then make that read only. And then entry hash.read, okay, to place it on the screen. And that's the same thing. So index, okay, so the first, etc., column 1, part x is going to be 20 and 0. And then part y is going to be 10, sticky, tkew, okay, to stretch it horizontally. So let's actually save that and run it and see what we get. So let's try with the file, little file here. As you can see, now you get all the hashes. You can select them, double click on them, and you can even do something like this if you want to read more things, okay, like that. Okay, so everything is working, but let's try with the other one, which is the bigger one. So video, as you can see, loading, you wait, and then you get the results. And down here, you can add as many as you want. You can make that taller, and you can add even other hashes. So now you've got the hash generator, which is completely working, and that's pretty cool in my opinion. So now on the screen, you should see another interesting video about Python and Tkinter, so go and check that out. Don't forget that you can get the source code and other interesting things using the links down in the description. Like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.